day, dude, I feel like everybody's right and everybody's wrong.
100%. Why is this important? Why are we even going here? He's helped a lot of guys. He's also not had success with a lot of guys.
Come in with a purpose, and they're very intentional with what they do and how they do it.
From the majors to the sandlot, baseball and softball share space in one place. Welcome to the farm system.
Absolutely. So I'll kind of dive back, answer, the second half of that question. The first one was just talking about, this kind of goes back into when I opened up about when people saw me in a wheelchair, right?
Yeah.
I think that where I've matured now in just a short amount of time and getting closer to God is, and I've always kind of viewed this because I've had family members with anxiety and depression. I've had family members who passed away. I've had things where, like, I understand tomorrow's not guaranteed and be thankful for today. Like the song Tomorrow by Central Live. Yeah. I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I know who holds tomorrow. That's a banger, by the way. Shout out to Central Live. But it's so real because I resonate with that so hard because it's like, people always ask me, like, are you afraid to die? Like, I'm like, and I use a silly, like a stupid example, but I'm like, you could be outside in an airplane and a frozen turd could fall out from an airplane and hit you right on the head. And like, it's a dumb example, but it's like, the most bizarre things could happen. An AC unit could hit you when you're walking, like when you're walking by someone's house, right? But these are stupid examples, but I say that and it's like, yeah, I might have 120 resting heart rate. I might have, broken over 300 bones. I might have a big head, whatever the case may be. Like, I got these things wrong, but at the end of the day, it's like anything can happen. And so it's like, I've chosen to live my life and be like, what is God going to do with me? Like, how am I going to be able to lead people to him and live my life for him? Yeah. Because, like, anything could happen to any one of us. And so, for me, it's like, I've gained this perspective that I don't believe my situation's any greater, any smaller, like, than anybody's. Like, what I mean by that is, like, yeah, I've had surgeries. Yeah, I've had dark times. I've broken bones. I've had legs facing different directions. You could think it, I've probably experienced it. I've been dropped but numerous times by people. Boom, ended up in hospitals, things. But I say all that, like, mine's just a physical thing. Like, you can see it. But there's people out there with mental health struggles. There's people out there with spiritual struggles. Yeah. You can't even come to fathom what that experience is like. And so I am so blessed. Like I cannot really explain where I don't like to say, like, oh, just because I see other people have it worse, like, it makes me more appreciative. But in a way, it does. Like, it makes me sense, like, okay, how can I use my situation and my hurts and struggles to maybe impact someone who's maybe gone through a similar season or the same season or maybe something even worse? And so I always try to remind people is like, we don't know what's really going on. We don't really know what's going on. And I think nowadays with mental health being such a big thing and spiritual warfare being even greater than it's ever been, I mean, I believe God's making a big move right now in this world, and as he always has, but like even more so, like I just see way more like creators and people posting the word and this and whatever. Like, God is on the move, and I think that we just have to do a great job as a society and Christians to really just welcome people with open arms and just remember that what we always see on the outside isn't always what's on the inside. No. And I'm going to follow that up with, I talked about how I feel like God's using my story. Like, I'm at the prayer tent at Central, or the prayer table. And people will come up to me and be like, I only chose you because you're disabled, and I feel that you probably won't judge me for something I'm about to tell you. Yeah. Because you probably experienced something that I'm experiencing. And boy, like, I tell you what, if I'm not prayed up, because I know it's about to drop like a 12-6 curveball in there. It ain't going to be like a little, light. It's not going to be, slow pitch softball, it's not going to be slow, right? It's going to be, a fast pitch riser, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's going to be some heat there. And so I just think that's like something that you have to keep your eyes on, that you don't know how God's going to use your past hurt to help others.
Oh, it's so big. I think this all the time. So I don't know. You've met Skylar now, right?
Yes.
Right. So like Skylar, for example. So Skylar, again, one of my really good friends. He's launched the Aliante location here, out a branch off of Central. And again, like, I've been with him. I don't know if you knew this part. Maybe you did. Maybe you did. I might have mentioned it, but like the young adults that you went to.
Yep.
that's the group that we brought over there.
Really?
Yeah, the young adults, they tried multiple other times and it hadn't worked at Central.
Really?
So then we went to young adult. We launched that young adults group.
Yep.
I was over there and we aged out of it, and now
you're
we
old.
did that. Yeah, I'm old now. So we had to go Aliante. But yeah, no, like me, Tay, Sky, again, Drell was the leader. Like we were all like leading and led the Bible studies there for a while and helped people with that the transitions and kind of set up the foundation for
awesome.
how it's running now. But like the same thing too, though, is like Skylar was the main lead with that. But the reason I brought up Skylar is very similar, but just in a different way. He's covered head to toe in tattoos.
Yeah.
Right?
Was one of the nicest.
Yes, one of the nicest
It's the
people,
same
right?
thing.
And also too, like he's been homeless, he's been through like all these things. So like there's a softness that it brings, like him as well. It's like where, again, it's like disarming where you walk in church and you're like, oh man, I don't belong here. Like, oh, there's all these everybody's in suits and all these other things. Well, like, so first off, Central's not like that.
No.
Second
it's
off,
okay to not be okay,
yeah,
brother.
it's okay not to be okay. Like, they're up there in jeans and ripped jeans.
Yeah.
And their
Snapbacks.
J's on or whatever, right? Like they're doing their thing, right? But also too, like along with that is like I think about that. Skylar specifically for that location is like you walk in thinking you're going to church and you're like, oh man, like I walk in, this guy's got two other things.
Yeah.
Like you're like, okay, like if this guy's like speaking through, and I think specifically there as well. And one of the things it reminds me of is when Jesus is also, I was thinking back when he was talking about about the Pharisees, right? And he's talking about like how gold, like the outside, the exterior, right? They're like a cup that is gold and plated on the outside, and everything's good. But meanwhile, like in the inside, like they're rotting.
For sure.
And again, while it is, some people are like, oh, well, that's like mean. He just told someone like on the outside, they're gold, and the inside they're rotting. Like, no, like you saying the truth, like with love, is for us, like we've fallen in love with the physical appearance, the aesthetics, especially here being Vegas, it's aesthetic central. Like everything is aesthetic.
Literally.
Right. And so again, like plastic surgery has never been, higher. It hasn't been a bigger thing. Like all these things, like we've fallen in love with how things look exteriorly. And again, and if you think about that, right, like what that's tied to, right, is like the Prince of Deception. Well, the Prince of Deception is how we perceive something to be, but it is not, right? And so the Prince of Deception is amazing at aesthetics, right? Like we always think of like the enemy, like when we think about like the enemy, we think about like the horns, like this ugly creature, this other thing, right? But the Bible does not describe him like that at all.
Not at all.
It actually describes him the opposite, right? That he is actually very appealing.
Yep.
That we would be very drawn to it, that he would deceive us, that it's very easy to slip into his grasp, that like he's walking around like a roaring lion, right? On the hunt. And that, again, along with that, like we think that we'd be so easy to be able to point out evil when in reality, it's like it's the opposite, right? And so I think that's like important there. Like, these movies, like they point out this, the horns and this like pitchfork, like enemy, when in reality, like no, like and also too, the other thing is we start to think like the enemy is like out there, like somewhere out there, when in reality, like no, like he's taken root in our heart.
For sure.
Like he's in here. Right. He's like, he's in me too. Right. Like, again, like there's, if I'm not careful and I'm not discerning and I'm not with God and all those things, like he'll take it a millimeter at a time.
Yep.
Wiggle away at a time. The thing, just funny because it happened to me last night that I said that is, because I've heard that so many times, like, the enemy is okay with moving a millimeter at a time, right? He'll slowly take over your heart.
For sure.
But also too, when I was thinking about that, for some reason it popped in my head last night when I was doing my alone time with God in the shower. And then he goes, yeah, the enemy is okay. I was like, the enemy will move like a millimeter at a time. And he was like, yeah, but I can move mountains. Like, like he great. He's done all this work and he's done all these things in your heart. He's like, I can take it away like this.
Exactly. Yep.
Like all the work he's done with a breath, he says, I'll take out the enemy.
Sorry.
Like again, I'm so much more powerful, right?
Yep.
And like, again, the enemy, like what we did podcasts on this a while back ago, is first off, he likes to paint himself as the yin and yang, right? Like the counterpart, the evil of the good, when in reality, he never was. Like he was never. Again, a lot of people, again, going back into the enemy on this side, is again, he was an angel, right? Which is underneath God, right? it's just God's creation, another one of God's creations. And again, along with that, like angels are not equivalent to God,
For sure.
right? Like he's not the counterpiece. Like he never did have a chance. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like he wants, like I've said this before, but like he loves to give out this impression and to create doubt in your head that he's on the same playing field as God, and that he even has a chance. Like he's like a rightful, like, man, like God's really going to struggle with this one.
100%.
But like in Revelations does not say that at all. It's like no, God will come and take him out with a breath.
Yeah.
Like you're not even a struggle, to God, right? Because again, God is the Alpha, the Omega, and all these things. And that's where Hollywood and all these other things, they paint these videos of like, like exorcisms and like all these other things to like almost like, like God has to like struggle to overcome like the enemy, like they're like that's his grateful like enemy. That's like the yin and yang of it. And I just think that that's so important for us to remember is like how powerful God really is.
Absolutely.
Because like that's the enemy's like deception is to make us think that like he's an equivalent, like like the opposite of with that. And I think it's so important for us to point out.
I think it kind of leads into something that I've been harping on. Just one of the biggest things I'm really trying to work on this season of my life is practicing gratitude. I think it's a big thing because it can shift your mindset. And talking about how God is so powerful and how he moves. I've been saying this season ever since the end of last year, and I went into 24 with this, is your current season is a past prayer. That was one of my first videos that I posted on my social media. And what that means to me, it's simple but powerful. There's so many times that like we're humans. We want the next best thing. We got desires, God. Oh, God told me I want to do this. Well, you don't know the timing. You still want to go for it.
Yeah.
We're always looking for that next thing, right? That we tend to forget what God's done today and in the past to get us to where we are today.
Yeah.
And so like what I mean by in your current season, the past prayer, it's like I bet you no matter how dark your day is right now, you can look at something you're experiencing right now in this season of your life that you prayed for in the past. And I use an example really simple. I was like,
Amen.
I'm going to the grocery store, man. You really wanted this brand of chips, or whatever the case may be. You went home that night and you didn't even think of it. You didn't take the prayer that serious. You're like, God, next time I go to Smith's, bro, I'd really like some, the next brand of chips, And so you go back to Smith's, you got the chips, but you totally forgot you prayed that prayer, and you're like, God, why aren't you moving, dog? I've asked for this in this prayer, I've asked for this, but he's like, I got you chips, I got you the family, I got you
all the time.
The bill. And so I think it's such an powerful thing to remember that your current season, man, is a past prayer, because like
For sure.
and I can say it in my own life, like for me, I was like, God, look, like I'd love to move back to Las Vegas and get involved with Central.
Yeah.
I'm at where I'm at. I already told you what I've been struggling with, right? Unemployment, all this other crap, but like whatever.
Yeah.
But
He's still moving.
He's still moving.
Yeah,
but like not just saying that, it's just like I'm already looking like, okay, I've met people that are Christ followers that have similar interests like yourself. I've been able to move independently. I'm 21 in a wheelchair living independently. Most people aren't doing that at that age or with the wheelchair regardless. Like, that's all God. That's God making a way when there wasn't a way. And so I think that just reminds us how great and powerful God is. When we just kind of take a step back and think, okay, what in my current season is he doing that like maybe I forget? Because I get personally one of my biggest frustrations is like out there is just like we tend to take for granted of the little things, because like for me, I am very appreciative of everything, because it's like I know what it's like to not be able to breathe. Like I know what it's like doing like your arms stick facing that direction, and I know, and I'm not saying that out of pity. I'm just saying like it has made me way more appreciative of just the little things, like being able to see my family when I go home, or being able to see whatever. Like it has shown God's faithfulness to another element, but I had to be willing to take a step back and want to seek him in those little things.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing.
Yeah, I think it's an important piece, because the other thing is like even perspective wise, right? Sometimes, you can build this, like for me, it comes back to gluttony. And what I mean by this too, a lot of people talk, one of the sins that doesn't get a lot of talk, and again, Michael Todd does a series on this too, and he talks through it, but like we always assume is like, first off, we don't even use the word today. It's like gluttony. What does that even mean? And then the second thing on top of that, then when let's say you have a partial understanding of the word gluttony and you think about it just as like a food thing, like, oh, I like more food. I can't control myself with food. And like, that's a way that, like, again, for example, a lot of people go to food to tend with like trauma, right?
Absolutely.
Like let's say you had a breakup and you're like, oh, I'm getting ice cream. I'm doing all this stuff, right? And it's like a device for me, right? But like, gluttony has much more to do when he talks about, like, the Bible talks about gluttony. It's more of a sin of I need more, right? Like, this isn't enough, and that's like what we're telling God. Like, what you've given me isn't enough. What you provided isn't enough. Like, I need more. Always in search of needing more. Like, so for me, how gluttony played out in my life was with achievement. No matter what I achieved, I needed more. Right, because it was a high for me. Right, it was a, and then, but the problem was, is like I would struggle for it, and then soon as I would get it, it didn't matter to me anymore because it was over. I've already achieved it, so there was like right on to the next thing, and I really struggled with those things. Like the gratitude was a massive struggle in my life, and that's what I mean by that too. Is like a lot of people believe that gratitude is something that's based on external circumstance. Right? They believe that I can only have gratitude when all of these things that I want to happen. The problem is, like you said, so many of the things that you did want to happen did happen, but since they've already happened, you don't appreciate it anymore, right? You only wanted it because you couldn't have it. Now you have it, you don't appreciate it. So then instead, when you understand that gratitude is a perspective,
For sure.
and that it is not an external circumstance, right? And then it is a muscle, right, that we can develop, right? And that's why we even have a gratitude wall, right? Like over there, right? Our gratitude wall with our players is we're trying to develop in them a perspective that is of reflection, and also too that, like, again, like we are in search of, like, I remember this, and this was going back into baseball here, is I would train because I was like, again, baseball, I was passionate, right? Like that was my thing. I could tell you again, I always say the story, like I could tell you every time a sprinkler turned on anywhere in the park next to my house, like 2:30 in the morning, because I was out there running sprints when I was in high school. Like, again, like achievement was a big deal, like making it in baseball, and like that passion for me, it was like a deep drive. But again, that's where I was finding value. Now the problem is I would train, and then a big time moment in the game, boom, I'd hit a homer, right? But this is where I started becoming mindful of my heart condition. I'd hit the homer, big time moment. My dugout is losing their mind, right? So juiced.
And you said it was all me.
Well, no, even worse. I hit first base and be like, yeah, but that's what I'm supposed to do. Right? Like, and when I say that, somebody's like, well, that's okay. Well, that's good. All these other things. I'm like, no. Let me tell you the depth behind it. Even when I did what I was trying to train and all those other things, I wouldn't let myself have it. You know what I'm saying? It'd be like, even when I did achieve it, it would be like, well, yeah, that's what I trained for. Like, I was almost like angry with myself. Like, I should be doing this all the time.
Yeah.
Right? Like this, because it wasn't filling the cup of the suffering. All the things that I put into it, all the work that I had to do for it, that moment wasn't filling me up. You know what I'm saying? And then later on, I would get home and I'd be like, man, that was pretty cool. Like, you know what I'm saying? I hit a home run in a big game, like all the things. But in the moment, I'm like, yeah, like this is what I trained for. Like I should be doing that. Like it's like I expected the result. Like I deserved that result, and I actually deserved even more than I was getting. This isn't enough.
For sure.
Right? Like, and that spirit of gluttony, like inside of my heart and of achievement, it left me without a place of like gratitude, and also too led to some places of, again, some dark things and like how and again, it started coming out when how I would treat others. Because if somebody, this hurt me coaching. I was a guy that was a workhorse. So when somebody was lazy, but they got results,
it made you mad.
It made me resentful.
Yeah.
Right? You don't deserve that.
Yep.
You ain't done the work I did. I did 3 times the work you did. How are you batting 400? I'm struggling to get in the lineup. How are you hitting home runs? Like, dude, I stay and hit it after every day. How are you? And then as a coach, it gave me an issue. It gave me a problem coaching those athletes because all I knew was suffering.
For sure.
Right? And so I looked at them and wanted them to suffer like I suffered, to struggle like I struggled subconsciously, right? This is all reflection as God has healed me from a lot of this stuff. And so I was a bad coach for those players because first off, you shouldn't want your players to suffer. Okay. Right. You shouldn't want them. And also too, I say this to people all the time because sometimes I've had people do that to me, right? Like they don't have what, I have, right? They're not in the position that I'm in. Right. And so they're like, and also too, I'm the youngest sibling in my family. So they're always like, you're the spoiled one, of course. Maybe the family. Right? But again, I think that perspective is like learning as well. It's like, you're right. Like I'm standing on the shoulders of giants.
Absolutely.
Right. Like I do, like, for example, I didn't pave that road out there. Someone else paved that road, right? I didn't build America. You know what I'm saying? Someone else built it, right? And then we're standing all on the shoulders of all these people of privilege that we have of being able to stand from that. And you're right. Like I didn't have to go through the suffering like the guys did back in the 1720s. Like I didn't.
Yeah.
Right. And also too, for someone else to get to a place in my life too, let's say, for example, again, like you were born into worse poverty than I was, right? Like, let's say that you were born into much more family trauma than I had or whatever those things, and you had to overcome these things. And this is where, from my own experience, right, that I've learned these lessons is that when you start to hang your accomplishments as your identity, then what it starts to do is then when others didn't have to go through those things to get those same things, it creates resentment because you have pride that's built up because you have pride in your accomplishments.
Yeah.
And now that separation, not only from you and the person, but also too, now think about this. This was another big one for me was, well, if I did it, how can I give God credit for it? It's my dub. If I give him gratitude, I'm losing status.
Dude, that's deep because I resonate with that because I just want to stop you there for a second because like I struggle with the Bible verse and it's like whether I eat or drink, I got to do everything for the glory of God, right? Something like that. So I paraphrase.
Yeah.
And my apologies. And
that's okay. There's a lot of verses in there.
No, literally. And so
yeah.
But as someone earlier on, in the faith, I was like, when I'm drinking water, how can I like drink water for God?
Same.
And I was like,
hear you.
I'm smacking on canes. Like, well, how am I supposed to be like, all right, Jesus, this is for you. This bite right here, bro.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
But I understood as I matured. It was like your heart posture. It was like, okay, are you appreciative that you were able to get the canes? Were you appreciative that you were able to even have water?
Or how did you speak to that lady at the canes when you got the food and all this stuff? Exactly. Like,
so that
where's
was
your heart at?
I wrestled with too. It's like, whoa, like, okay, like that was so confusing for me. And so I just wanted to kind of interrupt you on that because I thought that was something that was so like confusing in a way because I was like, I'm understanding I got to give things to God. I understand that like I kind of did it, but like it's his, like you said. And so it's like at the end of the day, when you realize, like, I'm just going to go back again to like Pastor Judd said, like when you realize like God gives you everything you have, whether it's your gifts, abilities, materialistic things, everything, your whole mindset shifts to be like, I'm just a vessel for him, and everything is his.
Yeah, and what I add this to, if you're stuck here and you're being like, yeah, but like I made those choices, like I did those things, but okay, I'm gonna give you something that's gonna shake you. I'm sorry, it steps on my own toes too.
Let's do it.
All right, there's someone else that's done exactly what you did or more and hasn't gotten that result. So if it's just your work and it's just what you've done, well, then everyone that does that work and does those things should get that result. And that's just not the truth.
That's a fact.
And then also, too, there's people that have done less that do have that result or better. So if it's just based off of what you've done and your decisions and your works and your self-control and your blah, 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 blah.
It's not the same outcome for everybody.
It's not the same outcome for everybody. It's not
You're
the same
right.
algorithm, right? Which means that God, there's a variable in there, right? That just because I do this work doesn't guarantee an outcome. And that's where because I used to, this is what built up a lot of resentment inside me too, and I had to come to the wisdom side of this, right, of God blessing me with this, is, again, I did work way harder than a lot of, again, I was at an academy. I knew, like, I was there open to close.
For sure.
I was, again, like Taylor knows that it was her uncle's academy. I was there where 2 a.m. cleaning the place, cleaning toilets, catching bullpens, doing everything, hitting a million times a day,
for sure.
all these things, and not having the results of some of these other guys, right? And so, yes, you could say it's like what you're working on and all these things, but no. But here's the thing, and again, I'm speaking to the choir here right now for you. Is like, yo, okay, look. Also, we're also blessed literally from birth, genetically, with different things, right? Like Taylor's grandfather used to always tell me, he was a big heavyset Puerto Rican. And he used to go, well, I could have desires to be a jockey. I just wasn't built that way, like, and so like, and again, like, and also too, right? Like it as well, like, again, I'm sorry to break this to you. I don't know if this is one of your dreams, but if one of your dreams is to be a sumo wrestler, you know what I'm saying? Like it might not be.
And it's the same thing for baseball. Like I'm real, like,
for sure.
But I love this that you brought this up because this is amazing because a lot of it is, I think it's a lot of it, we shift our mindset, like, we have to focus on what God's given you, not what we wish God gave us.
Yes,
and
I think which is saying that better than God.
Yes, exactly, because it's like, and I'm so thankful for my family to do this because I give a lot of this, like my dad and the Lord speaking through my dad. My dad never allowed me to play victim. Yeah. My dad never allowed me to just be like, well, that sucks. Like, I'm handicapped. Like,
and if somebody knows you, I was going to bring that up.
Yeah,
is again, since I've known you. There is a pride that not like a spiritual pride, right? That you carry, like, and not one time have I ever felt like you felt like a victim of your circumstance, right? And I wanted to bring up why you thought that is. So I love that you.
So this is something that I think is important. It's like it's okay. So this I might get some backlash for this, but I love it because it's something I'm passionate about.
Yeah,
I think that a lot of it's nature nurture. I think it's the way you're raised in some of it. Because my dad, so like for instance, I had friends over, right? We had them all over. We played NBA 2K. Yeah. They got bored. Like, I want to go shoot outside in your real hoop. Mm-hmm. Well, you think I'm going to be able to go play basketball? No. Yeah. But my dad said, no, you're going to go out there and sit with them. You're going to talk smack and you're going to ref. You're still going to be involved, but it looks different. It doesn't mean that you're less than. It doesn't mean victim feel bad, lay in your bed, be like, oh, I can't do it because, I can't go play basketball. It's the same thing for my passion in baseball.
Yeah.
At the real age, I was like, I used to play Miracle League here in town, and I was like, okay, that's cool, but I like to keep the rules. I like to compete. Like, this wasn't fun for me. So I got deep into the analytics. I got deep into the ways I could impact the game. I was like, wait a minute. I still love baseball. I can't quite play, but what has God gifted me with? God's gifted me with the ability to speak to people. Yeah. God's gifted me the ability to be able to reach people that probably aren't, where I am in life and those types of things. But it was this mindset shift that I made early on in life. It's like, okay, God, I'm not going to ask why you didn't give me this, but can I get into like what you did give me and how I can use that?
Can we like set an alarm right now that just goes spiritual blessing, right? It's because like I think about that, right? It literally reminded me of that clip. And I'm going to twist it kind of what I was talking about with you about that chosen clip, right? Where Jesus comes up with a man that's disabled, can't walk, at the pool, right? And again, don't think this isn't some YMCA, right? We're talking about like this pool at the time, if you don't know the story, was supposed to be like a spiritual, like healing type, the water would start bubbling and they would all rush to get to the middle and like the healing from it. So like this man was laying by this pool for like 38 years, like he'd been laying here, right? Yeah. And so Jesus walks up to him and he's like, he's like, shalom, like, like, how are you doing today? Like, and again, this is also on a Sabbath. So, again, there's supposed to be no, again, there's not supposed to be no work, quote unquote. And he's like, hey, I got a question for you. And he's like, would you like to be healed? Right. And he's like, what do you mean? Like, would I like to be healed? Like, I've been laying here. You think I'm laying by this pool for no reason? Like, like, what do you mean? Would I like to be healed? Right. Like, it makes no sense from an earthly perspective, but like spiritually, like where Jesus is coming from, why this grabbed me the other day too, as well. And then also too, this is where we miss. We see the physical blessing, but that's not Jesus, like, he's not concerned with the physical. He'd been suffering with that. But spiritually is what make that physical blessing, as Judd mentioned, like actually something that was rooted, because when he left, it wasn't like he just got up and walked away and like everything was great. Spiritually, it changed his heart. Absolutely. Right? It changed who he was. But what he says to him, is, again, basically what happens is, again, like this man, basically what he would do, again, this has been for 38 years, what he would do is the water would start to bubble and all of these people would be around trying to get blessed and and have healing in some way, some fashion. And they would all run in. This guy would try to like crawl in, on his elbows, right? Like crawling into this pool, right? Every single time it would start to bubble. But again, like as you can imagine, you never know what's going to happen. There's all these other people that just
Yeah.
running in, right? And he's over here trying to jog himself in, pull himself in. And so Jesus asked him, he's like, would you like to be healed? And then so in the chosen, the guy starts giving all the reasons, because he's like, well, I'm trying to be healed. Like I'm trying to fall into the thing. And then Jesus is like, hey, I didn't ask you about like, who's helping you. I'm not asking you about who's not helping you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also not asking you about all the reasons why it hasn't worked or all the things. I'm asking you, right? If you knew who I was, right? If you knew who I am, I'm asking about you, right? And so it reminded me in this way, like, yes, in this way, we think about it physically, but flip-flopping that and tying that back in, a lot of us spiritually will have all these reasons why we don't have these fruits, right? Why we're not successful, or why we're all these other things that we find in this world. But like, again, okay, well, like, no, God's talking, he's asking you specifically, like with your heart, like your love, like your mercy, your grace, your gentleness, your goodness, your self-control. Cause again, I always bring that one up because we always forget about self-control, it being a fruit. And again, like the reason I can have the self-control that I can have is because of God and like my foundation. But I think about this as well of, this perspective of in that moment when God asking, and you saying that earlier, of being like God asking like, hey, like there's healing here that I almost think about. I want to give a perfect example of this. I think it's called. I think the movie's called Shallow Hal. You know that movie? Okay, it's definitely not a. Yeah. No. I might be wrong in the movie too. Who knows if I even got the right name wrong? Yeah, maybe it's the wrong movie. Okay, so it's the guy where he and again I could be wrong with the movie name. I'm bad with names. Anyways, so the movie is the guy where he is he basically they do this like wish or something where he starts seeing all women as like gorgeous, right? And like, so some of these girls that he ends up dating are like these, like, some of these bigger women, or like they have all these, is it? Am I right in the name? Yeah. And so like there are all these other things that are happening where, again, like he sees everyone and all these women, all these people are dating. He's like, how are these girls like into me? Like, and it's such an interesting movie. But what I mean by this is nothing really changed, but his perspective did. Right? While the movie had a different meaning and they went a different direction, I think about that all the time, that I could be in the same exact situation, but have a very different perspective. Because at the end of the movie, one of the things that he brings up, and this is also what I think about with like some of the secular stuff, is sometimes God will bring meaning out of, like, again, I don't need to be in church to get a message from God. Right? Like I could be in the middle of nowhere. I could be in the the valley, right? And God show me something, through, he uses everything, right? And so at the end of the movie, he's like, why did you take, because again, all of a sudden he goes back to his old perspective, and he's like, why did you take that from me? Like I would have lived in that perspective for the rest of my life, basically. And he's not saying perspective, but like how he saw these women and again, his opportunities and all these other things, right? And like how happy he was. And I think about that as well, like the spiritual blessing, right, is a perspective shift, for sure, right? That leads to gratitude, and also too, for me to see the world different. It doesn't mean that the world changed.
Yeah, but it's the way you.
But how I view it, changed.
100%.
And that is the spiritual blessing, that I could have exactly. I could be exactly where I'm at right now, with the same physical limitations, with the same, financial limitations, or setbacks, or struggles, or be in prison, or whatever that is, right, for you. But spiritually, the blessing is I can see it in a very different way. Because if I explain to you, when you hear, and we talked about this with Paul, right, when you hear Paul, right, and wrote like over half the New Testament, right, in the Bible, is that if we look at that and you look at his perspective, if I tell you about what's going on in his life, you'd be like, you don't sound very blessed. You like, again, and like some of his disciples struggled with physical ailments, right? We talked about this as well. You would say as well, being like, well, if you're so blessed by God and the God that people put in their head, they start to think, well, my God, well, nobody would be suffering. And it's like, well, what you're imagining, first off, is heaven. Okay.
Amen.
Like, you're describing heaven.
Amen. We'll be there, baby.
There will be again, no physical elements. There's no tears that are shed. There will be, again, all of us again.
Be taking you yard up there, though.
But he's giving the greatest vision. I love that. No, for sure. Right. All of that stuff. Right. And again, like, what you're describing is you're wanting heaven here now. Right. And what you're yearning for, right. What you're struggling with the separation from is like, no. There is that. Right. But we're not there now. Right. And also, again, for us to keep that perspective as well, as being like, there is no world and there is nobody, no matter how much money, no matter how much status, no matter how much, whatever we gain in this world, that you have no trials, tribulations, or whatever. Have you ever met someone that has no problems?
No, not again.
I've never met someone that's like, nope, I got no problems, everything's great. I don't care how much money you got. I don't care how much. I don't care where. Everybody
For sure.
shares suffering, right? And we all know what it's like to go through trials, tribulations, all those things. And again, we forget that all the time, is that, again, that at heart, right, it comes back to perspective, because, again, we had a Paige, she's the shortstop over at
Oregon.
Yeah. So she shared, again, that podcast that we did a little while back. When they went over and they do those trips when they go out of the country and they go and they share. And so she was like, one of the things that like kind of led her and gave her that perspective is like, I went to a place that they had far less than what we had. They're literally, like, there's these, think about this. There's literally people to this day that don't even have clean drinking water. Yet they're happy. Yet they're dancing and then they have so much joy and peace and all these other things. And it's like, but hold on. I thought it was from what we achieved. I thought it was because we needed that house or that extra job or that all those other things. Like, how does, and again, that's a Western philosophy of like, what success looks like. Right. When in reality, I was listening last night. I was working out. I was listening to NF. I don't know. Yeah. So he's like, of course. My dog. So I was listening to NF, and one of the things he says in one of his songs.
What song?
I'm trying to remember which one. I went through a whole playlist last night.
You know the song, Oh Lord?
Yes.
That song.
Yeah.
That's deep.
Yeah, I was listening. And it might be. I think it starts with a G. It's like one word. Gone. It might be his song Gone. But I'm trying to get back to the original thought of what he said. He basically, man, where were we at? He basically just had this sign of also too, just like perspective wise of, he's had these successes, like he's had these other things, but also at the end of the day, like, realizing like there is this it's not tied to these earthly perspectives, because again, everybody thinks, and I think this was a blessing for me, it was a blessing for me to achieve the things I set out to achieve, because at an early age, because when I hit them all and I'm like,
that wasn't enough.
This didn't do anything I thought it was going to do.
Like, 100%.
Literally, you know what I'm saying? I backtracked. Literally. That's what brought me back to baseball. Like I had the money, I had the job, I had lived in Austin, Texas, had the Mustang, had the thing, like all these things when I was growing up, it was like check.
Yeah.
Oh, when all these things happen, like I'm going to feel this way. Bro, I had all those things and felt worse.
Retweet, literally.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
so retweet,
dude. Like literally,
I had all those things that felt worse.
Dude, I'm like, ever since I was in third grade, what do you want to be when you're going to work? I want to be a college baseball coach.
Yeah.
Boom, got there, grinded my life away.
Hold on a second.
I was like, whoa. Yeah. And the Lord's like, hey, maybe this, maybe that. And so I think that was just something for me where it was an impactful moment to realize that everybody has a God-sized hole in their heart.
Yeah.
And I think that is such a powerful thing within itself, because if you could try anything in this world to fill that, but at the end of the day, if you don't fill it with God, you're gonna always have that hole. And like you mentioned before, no one's perfect. No one, has no troubles. And to the people listening, I really want to harp on this a little bit, because I don't know what you're going through. I don't know what you're walking through. I don't know what season it is. And I know it's easier said than done, but if you take a little bit out of your day and you ask God to change the desires of your heart, and you ask God to change your perspective on your current circumstance, I promise that you will get this overwhelming sense of peace. I'm sure you'll be happier. Numerous things, and this is something that I've been very blessed to learn at a younger age because I knew I only got one life. I only got this life, and I knew that God was going to use me for a reason, and those type of things. And and I also think, like I said, it was my family and things like that, the way I was raised. But at the end of the day, I made that decision internally that, like, okay, God, let's see, let me take a step back and see what you can use this for. And so, to anybody listening, I just want everybody to realize that, like, you're not alone in your story. God's with you. He's willing to intervene. You just have to spend time to seek Him, and you have to make sure that you are willing to be able to be changed and formed into the one that He's called you to be. And so, I just wanted to kind of just touch up on that, guys. And, like, I didn't wake up one day and be like, oh, I feel this way, and I'm not worried about my circumstance. I'll be straight up and honest with the listeners. There's never one day I woke up and I was like, man, God, why am I in a wheelchair? It's never crossed my mind. And it's people are like, there's no way. And I'm just like, it's never. And I think it's because I've had this overwhelming sense of peace that I've seen worse. I've seen ways that God's moved, and it's like there has to be a reason behind it.
Yeah.
And if you believe in Jesus alone,
I love your faith, bro.
then it's like there's no reason to doubt what God can do with your situation. So
Amen.
I just really wanted to really put that out there. And then I also wanted to go back. This was a little bit ago. We had a couple topics that I think were awesome. There's three things I want to mention. One, you talked about your gratitude wall and talked about that. You know, I shouted you out in my podcast I recorded this morning with my buddy. I was doing Pat O'Malley, great dude. But we were talking about like Christian and baseball people and things about how, you know, how you put your faith first. And I really wanted to let these listeners know that, like, you can still practice gratitude while trying to, you know, have aspirations and grind. And that's the thing.
You
it's like
both.
You can have both. And here's the thing.
Fire.
Literally. And here's the thing is, like, being content doesn't mean you're complacent.
Yes.
And that is something I've heard, and that's something that literally, and it was Judd, but I've even said that before, like I even heard that sermon, but Pastor Judd is amazing, comes out with bangers weekly, but literally, but like, just because you can be content in your situation doesn't mean you're complacent. So it's like, I have aspirations. Like, this is something my dad always would say. This is a quote, and I can't say the whole quote, but he would just be like, Jesus is not going to come down and miracle your butt something. You got to put yourself in a position to win. And he's not saying that Jesus can't perform miracles. He's saying that you have to put yourself in a position to God use you. If you don't, it's not going to, you can't eat Doritos and, you know, sit on the couch playing Xbox and being like, well, why can't I do this in life? Or why can't I do that?
Yeah.
You have to be proactive and, you know, work hard, but you can be content in that season where it's not necessarily where you want or where God's calling you to be. So I think it's really important to not confuse complacency with contentment and gratitude. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about, and then you can open up all three of these things, but you talked about earlier competitiveness and faith and sports. And I think this is that's a messy one because I'm sorry, when we're between that white lines, I'm going all six wheels. I got a 6 wheel now.
I'm going 6 wheels.
I'm going hard. Like, and it's not unethical. I'm not saying anything personal. I'm not doing anything. But I train my guys, and when we're on the field, we're taking care of business. And at the end of the day, like, you know, you know, that's what it's going to be. And I think there's a difference between confident and cocky. I think there's a difference between, you know, having sportsmanship and being like the nice guy, right? Like when everybody thinks of sportsmanship, they're like, oh, lovey-dovey, like let's give everybody a hug after the game. No, you just play the game the right way, but that doesn't mean when I'm taking a hard 90 because I'm going to take that extra base if he makes a mistake, you know, and I'm still going to be nice. I might slide and maybe rough the guy up by accident, but I did what I need to do to try to help my team win. It doesn't make me a bad person. I still was like, hey, man, my fault. I just messed you up a little bit, but I had to get the second to tie and run. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think sometimes people think it's like another way of saying it, which obviously I think more people would agree with too as well. From the like, you don't need to lose to make God look good.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? Like you
100%.
don't need to be passive, right? People think of Jesus and God too as this like like no, he's the victor.
For sure.
Like God's competing,
Yes.
right? It's just easy for him, right? Like again, like there is no competition.
Yeah,
right?
he's like playing against the Walmart third shift.
Yeah, like right. And so I think the song that I was trying to find the exact verse too, the reason I was bringing that up of and because this ties in is the song too of NF. This one is Why.
Yeah, I love that song.
Right? And he starts the first verse with, yeah, what's your definition of success?
Yeah.
Right? And then he goes into, like, I don't trust the thoughts that come inside my head.
He's like, I know the whole song.
So I don't trust the things, the beats inside my chest. Again, I don't trust my heart, right? Who I am, who I want to be cannot connect why. Don't think I deserve it. You get no respect. Like he goes down all these things, and one of the things
the people I love the most. Why?
Yeah,
I know the whole song.
I'm gonna have you rap here in a second. And so, but there's this one line specifically where where as he talks, he's saying like, "What's your definition of success?" And the one that, if I'm paraphrasing here because I can't find the exact verse, is that. He's saying, and again, NF is, if you don't know, he's a rapper, and he talks about God. I wouldn't necessarily call it worship or something like that, but like he it's just like his internal struggle, and he's just like through it, and it's interesting. But one of the things he talks about is like your definition of success is like also just like it's freedom, like spiritual freedom,
Absolutely,
right, and that being different than some material blessing, because again, I could have. Because again, I heard somebody talk about this, and I love this so much. As a pastor was talking, and it was about how when our identity comes from something that is variable, that can change, that is dependent on our performance. So like, for example, let's say it's dependent on how much money we make. Well, guess what? Like you could lose your job tomorrow. And if that's your identity, then all of a sudden, then what are you worth now? If it's worth on you being the superstar on the team, well, on this team, you're not the superstar, right? Or if you get injured, right? Or okay, it's based on like your family and like your role inside your family. Well, like, guess what? Your kids grow up and like your role changes. If it's based on, what someone else thinks of you, well, guess what? That other person changes their mind all the time, right? Not even all the time. It's just being like, hey, like this is based on if my identities come from like how you feel about me. Maybe you're just having a bad day, and now all of a sudden, like, what is my worth? Now it's there. Where when our identity is based inside of God, right, and how he thinks about you, like, doesn't change. His love for you doesn't change. He's the same yesterday as he was today, as he will be tomorrow, right? Like God's character is the same, and He's the one that defines you, and that definition is true. Like, you're my 100%. Son, right? Like, that's something that can't be taken away. And one of the things that I think is so, again, as this pastor was talking about that, was giving the example of, okay, well, now when I'm free from external circumstance, right, and I'm free from this ever changing, it gives me a security, right, and it gives me a place where I'm not trying to like earn your respect, or like I'm not trying to like, again, I don't need to go and achieve anything. Now, some people can slide that into, well, that sounds like complacency. No. I work hard out of worship to God. I'm winning today out of worship to God, not because I need the win, right? I don't need the win to give me identity or to give me status, or I already have status. I could lose today, but now what I have is freedom, right? And I have freedom to win or lose, but again, out of worship from what God. I'm not trying to. There's nothing I can do to earn more of God's love, to earn more status from God, or there's nothing I can earn or achieve with Him, right?
100%.
Like, and also too, the other thing is for me to realize is that I'm worshiping Him for what He's already done, not to gain something from Him.
Dude, I love that.
You know what I'm saying?
It's a couple things I want to mention about that. One, when I'm at the prayer tent, when I'm praying with some people, I got this awesome guy. His name is Charles, and he's at the prayers, and he prays at Central. And his big thing is like, when you pray for what God's gonna do. You have the word, and it says what the word says. You're thanking Him. When you're asking for something, you're thanking because you know He's gonna answer. It's not necessarily like you're asking. It's like, God, I thank you for the healing that's coming my way. Whether it's not the way I think it's going to happen, but you're going to heal me one way or another. And so I think that was like something that hit me. And this was just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Because it was my first time working with him in this shift. And I was like, whoa. Like when you come together and you're praying over somebody and like he took, like you could really feel the Holy Spirit with him. And he was just going on this big thing about like, how, prayer is really just thanking God for something that he's already going to answer. But the thing is he might not answer it the way you want, so you might not think it's an answered prayer.
Yeah.
And then the second thing I wanted to mention too is I remember talking about the success thing. This was a story. The guy I'm coaching under in Indiana, virtually, he told me this story because he was, talking about some different things with the program. He said, let me tell you this. He says, all right, let's say we're hypothetically the best NAIA team. We go 56-8. We go all the way to the World Series. We lose. In the whole world, what do they think? We're losers. We won 56 games. We were the best. We were the best, number one.
Yeah.
When you made it to the World Series and you lost, what are you?
Yeah.
You're a loser.
Yeah.
So he's like, what other ways can we measure success?
Yeah.
What other ways? And so he's a Christian, a great guy. And he's like, so we find success in group Bible studies. We find success in the little things and other ways to measure success. I think that's so huge, even in faith. You can use that. You might have gone, okay, let's just say, I don't know, just use a random example. You might have gone to, a volunteering event for like 9 months straight, right? And you might have done everything, but let's say that company shuts down, but you committed your whole 9 months to that. You don't know the amount of impact that you made on people's lives during that 9 months.
Yeah.
Even though it's not there anymore, you made that impact through that 9 months. And I think that it's that same concept. It's like, okay, how can you measure success in that 9 months versus it not being there anymore? And it's like, I think that's so important for people in the faith because it's like, you have to figure out a way to be able to have, Jesus at the center. And also just remember that, look, this is a journey. This life is a journey.
Well, and I think it's like the good news I think is with that is, for me, the freedom is so important. And what I mean by that is, again, like, and I've kind of mentioned on that, but like the place of freedom to not, like, the freedom to be myself. Like, if that to me is definition of success, right? Is like the freedom to to more truthfully and fully be who I already am. And what I mean by that, though, is I actually tweeted that because there was a like one of the message version of a different verse, and somebody like commented on it the other day, and it's like, oh man, I've never heard it like from that perspective. And again, like, because obviously the Bible preaches hard, and like when we start to say like ourselves, right, we start to think, like earthly kind of yourself, right? But when I heard like this, the freedom of being like myself, well, no, like, to truly be my true identity and be free of anxiety and like be free of depression and be free of other people's judgments, to be free of like, I can just be, to be free of thinking I need to go and do something, achieve something, do X, Y, and Z. Like, I can just like passionately chase after what I find important in my heart. And because this is the thing, a lot of people won't go do what they really would love to do because they're like, yeah, but I need that house. But I couldn't have that car. But people wouldn't find that very like static. Like, like they would say like, what? Like, yo, maybe, again, like maybe it is, a nonprofit, or maybe it is, again, serving at the church, or maybe it is like, there's a lot of things that are not worldly prestigious, right? That people wouldn't find a whole bunch of status in or whatever. Right. But also too, like, again, I'll tell you from the other side is that like, if you're getting off on the high and the dopamine hits of people telling you how important you are, all those other things, like, this is the problem, is when you're accepting their praise, you're also subject to their boos. It doesn't work it doesn't work one way, right? They can take away their cheers.
Yep.
Right? And if your identity is based on what they all think of you,
it'll all go away.
Yeah. And also too, that's, first off, there's a lot of times, like, again, I especially too, I think about this on social media too. Like, bro, it's a minute and 30 seconds. You're getting a little nugget of something I'm saying. It could be so out of context. It could not
100%.
apply. Like, it could. First off, if I read the Bible and it makes me upset, you think that there's something I'm talking about hitting wise that might make you upset because it disagrees with something your grandfather said or something, whatever, right? Or one of your favorite coaches said this or what you've always believed. Yeah. Or you don't like my haircut or whatever, whatever, right? Whatever the thing is, right? But also too is, again, I was telling somebody this the other day too, is like, yo, like, God has blessed me where he gives me enough and also made me okay with I'm content with what I'm doing. I can do what I'm still chasing down and we're growing and all those other things are happening, all the blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, there isn't this need
now. Yeah.
Like, for example, if we never got any bigger, okay. If we got smaller and the farm closed, okay. If this was the last podcast, like I always tell people, like right now, I'm so unattached. And again, God help me, right? But I'm so unattached, and I really feel like if God put it on my heart where I was like, close the door and never come back, I swear I lock the door and just let's never do any of this again, right? And don't get me wrong, that's not what he put on my heart, right? But also too, I've done that in other areas of my life. Like I literally was in corporate America, and that part of my testimony, right, was like I told you, like I had all those things. I was like, again, I was working for Planet Fitness. I was again at the time, it was like fastest growing gym in the United States. Again, like we had most profitable, like all the things, like again, business wise, like was in a really good spot, was a regional manager, about to be a director, like all these things, and literally being like, okay, right. And I literally gave up. It was Sunday, God gave me a word of being like, I realized that I needed to get back in the longer story, but like I need to get back into baseball. And like Monday started making those moves happen. Like again, the thing of close the door, I was just right there. I'll go a different place. You know what I'm saying? And I think that with that is like the freedom to be able to do that, to pivot, to change your mind, to go wherever God calls you to go, to, again, to not be tied to one spot, not to be tied to one idea or one philosophy or, one identity, right? Of all these things, like people are constantly trying to put you in boxes and define you a certain way, right? The guy in the wheelchair, all that, like they're trying to put you in these boxes.
For sure, but you don't know where God's going to use you.
No.
And when you put limits on God, like that's your number one mistake right there.
Yeah, you're making God smaller.
Yeah, and I think that, that speaks so much to me because it's literally my current season in a way, right? Yeah. And I spoke a lot about that earlier, but I think it's just so important to be like, to really remember it's okay to not necessarily know yet. Because I'm sure there's things going on in the business side of the farm that you're still up in the air about, that you're waiting for God to speak to you. Like, do I open this part? Do I do this part? Whatever that looks like.
Every day.
And I know for me, it's like, I know I'm called in the ministry, but I don't know if it means I'm going to be a head coach at a Christian college one day, or I'm going to start doing lessons, or I'm going to start doing this. I'm making active steps to start towards some of the things that I feel led to do. But I also have a part of me where God's like, dude, you're good at talking to people. Maybe Christian counseling. Maybe
for sure.
So but what God's told me to everybody listening, I think this is easy. Just start. Just start. And what God told me is just get involved. Yeah. And so I moved, got back involved. I I'm starting Central Academy, and that's it. I wasn't going, okay, God, but what part of ministry? For a long time, I'm going to be honest, I was like, God, I want to know, what in ministry? He's like, I got you. You got to dive in head first.
Yeah. Well, I also literally, like what you're saying is that mindset too is like, okay, well, the problem with our human, let's just go like physical limitation. Yeah. We can only see so far.
Yep.
Right? So we're asking God to show us something we can't see. Right? And spiritually, it's the same way, right? I almost think about it. Like a GPS, right? God's seeing the overall map. He knows from here to here and the route that the whole thing's going to go. The problem is we're limited. Like God's seeing the GPS and sees the map from the top. Yeah. We only see the first street, road. Right? Road. And so imagine me, you're driving down the road, right? Yeah. And I'm giving you directions, right? And I'm saying, hey, this next light, take a left.
Yeah.
Right? I'm giving you context
Yeah.
of like, hey, what you can see, this light, take a left.
So I'm like, it
Right?
looks like there's traffic down there.
And I'm like, hey, I can see the traffic. We're good. You know
You're
what I'm saying?
good.
Like, it's
Go
gonna be good.
left.
Yeah, go left, right? Or, hey, normally I go right, but I'm like, no, today we're going left because there's
left.
traffic to the right,
For
or there's a
sure.
car accident there, or
Yep.
there's something going on over there, right? And then, so we want God, and sometimes we get upset with God because He's not showing us the full path, but He can't because of our limitations.
100%.
Spiritually, we're limited. And again, like, then when we look back with perspective, we go, oh, that's why He made me go this way. And again, maybe sometimes we don't even we won't get that perspective. Maybe we're gonna wait till we see the big man and go, hey, you know what I'm saying? And He reveals it to us. But my point is, again, along with it, is like I always think about this is like with it, it's like, and this is why faith is so important. You have to have faith that when I'm in the car and I'm giving you directions, that I'm leading you, right? I'm leading you to where you trust that I'm leading us where we're trying to go.
1,000%.
And so you got to have faith in my, the direction and all those things from that
100%.
perspective.
100%.